Hello again. Most products fail because we waste time, money, and efforts building something nobody actually wants. But in a speed lighting fast changing consumer space, how can we understand what customers want today? Please welcome Eamonn Carey, Managing Director of Techstars London.
Thank
Hi.
you very much. It's good to see all of you, and welcome to my kitchen this Saturday morning. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. So I'm going to talk to you about building products that people love over the next 30 minutes or so. There's an option for you to ask questions in the Q&A section on the website, so feel free to do so there, and I'll come to those questions as we get to the end of the presentation. But right now, I'm going to share my screen, and we will get started. Okay. So a little bit about me before we start. My name is Eamonn. I have been in your shoes in the past. So I have been a founder 3 times. I had 2 companies that exited and one that I ran into a brick wall several times. I'm now an investor in over actually 60 companies. Across Europe, Asia, the US, and Africa. I've been involved in Techstars for many years as a mentor since 2013, as a managing director a couple of years after that, and also run a very large VC Slack community. So I'm heavily involved in all things in the investment world, and I'm also a partner at the fund, which is an early stage pre-seed investment fund. So have invested in lots of companies, have met lots of people who are trying to start businesses, and have a pretty good picture for what folks want to do. This is where I got started. I learned how to code when I was quite young. This is a Sinclair Spectrum computer that came out in the mid 1980s. So I'm showing my age here, but always loved computers, always loved tinkering with them and learning about code and playing games and various different things, and stayed with that throughout my life. So started a company in Dubai and London called Urban Travel. We built iOS and Android apps for the travel industry. So built Arabic language travel guides, English language travel guides, and lots of other different products, including the first ever travel guide to Kabul, which we built in partnership with the folks from Roshan. We were lucky enough to exit that company, and then started looking at the gaming space. So some of you may remember a game called Farmville, which was very popular on Facebook back in 2009, 2010. It was also a very spammy game. So you had to invite your friends to take actions in the game, and it led to your news feed looking a lot like this, where and this was before Facebook had an algorithmic news feed. So every day that you would log on, your news feed would just be full of people who were harvesting strawberries on Farmville. And so we thought, why can't you do something horrible to people? There was already a lot of this happening where people were expressing how much they disliked the game. And so we thought, over a small beer one evening, what if we could create a version of Farmville where you could be really horrible to one another and where you could do awful things? And so we came up with an idea we called Farm Villain, where you could do that, where you could give your neighbors' cows mad cow disease, you could burn down their barns, you could salt the earth on their land. And so it was really a Facebook game with a sense of humor. And in fact, some of the media coverage that we had when we launched Farm Villain led to people calling us the South Park of Facebook, and really kind of praising that fun and engagement that we had. And, we grew Farm Villain to hundreds of thousands of people in our community, millions of people who played the game. We were getting fan mail from people who said that every day that they played the game, it put a smile on their face, even in the middle of difficult times. And it showed me the viral power. We never spent any money on advertising to grow this. It was all word of mouth and all virality, because we built a product that made people happy, that put a smile on their face, and that made them engaged. And ever since then, that's been something that I've recognized. I subsequently went on to help out a company in the US called Keep, who give people rewards for their achievements in games and apps. And again, there, instead of seeing a terrible ad on your mobile phone every time you play a game, instead we would say, hey, you've got a new high score in Angry Birds, like here, is a Pebble smartwatch, right? Or here is a coffee from Starbucks, or here is a free soda from Coca-Cola. And again, just by doing something that made people feel intrinsically rewarded and motivated. We saw the power really of that product that someone loved. So I'm going to talk a lot about the lessons that we learned along the way in all of those companies over the next kind of 20 minutes or so. I'm now a part of Techstars. So Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. So we run everything from startup weekends, which hopefully some of you have participated in 160 countries around the world, right the way through to accelerators and a VC fund. So this map just shows a representation of where we've hosted events or where we have accelerator programs around the world. So we invest in around 500 companies every year globally, connect them with lots of mentors, advisors, partners, and investors, and generally try to help them grow and scale. And so as a result, I've seen a lot of people building products. I've seen a lot of people who've been successful in building products, and a lot of people who have failed because they haven't maybe always thought through what it is that the users want, what it is that's going to be delightful, what it is that's going to be engaging. And the reality is, with every single business that I've ever met, when I'm talking to them about Techstars or the fund, or even just speaking at conferences and events like this, everyone wants to see this graph, right? The classic hockey stick growth graph. And that could be your number of users, it could be your revenue, it could be your engagement rate, it could be the amount of time people are spending with your product. But ultimately, every business wants to see numbers going up and to the right. And the reality is that's very hard to do. Right? You know, what we normally see with companies is something that looks a lot more like this, where they get an initial bump of engagement when they launch the product, and then sometimes the novelty wears off and they're in this trough of sorrow where maybe they're not acquiring new users, or where some of the new features they're adding are not landing with their customers. You know, sometimes companies fail. Occasionally they go through a process of releasing and improving and iterating and, you know, getting to the promised land and getting to the stage where, you know, they can raise more capital, they can become cash flow positive, they can be acquired, or potentially even go through and an IPO. So, you know, the statistic that we hear is about 90% of companies that start never succeed, and it is a very, very tough process to go through. The good thing I would say is, you know, there are huge opportunities on the horizon. So this was the very first page that Tim Berners-Lee put up on the World Wide Web, you know, now close to 30 years ago. And when you think about what's been created on the internet in terms of the amount of value, the number of amazing companies, the number of big businesses that have come through in that period of time, it's remarkable. Likewise, if you think back to 2008, that was when the iOS App Store, the Google Play Store came into being, and how many empires have been built from mobile apps. And I think we're still at an early stage with IoT, with machine learning, with digital health, with education, and lots of other sectors. So huge opportunities to build products that are going to make a material difference in people's lives, and be products that people love in the future, and build big, sustainable, and very successful businesses. So some things that I've learned along the way, you know, one of the most important things I say to people is keep notes. You know, sometimes, and I'm sure all of us who are founders have woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and kind of laying in bed thinking this is the best idea ever. And sometimes if you roll over and go back asleep, you lose that thought forever. So I keep a notebook next to my bed. I have notes apps on my phone and on my iPad and on my laptop. And I go back and read over them every so often, and occasionally find things from notebooks 5 or 6 years ago that are an idea that I can implement or suggest to a company nowadays. So I think documenting the ideas that you have, even if they're crazy ones or silly ones, you never know when coming back to them will be useful. And also, if you don't write them down, you will definitely forget them. And I've lost count of the number of ideas that, you know, have, at the time that I had them, I thought were a total genius, and unfortunately never remembered them. And a big part of making notes is you know, reading and being aware of what's happening elsewhere in the world. You know, I'm a big fan of a company called Rome Research now, which allows you to kind of almost network your notes and see kind of common threads between all of the different notes that you're taking, whether it be notes about an article or a book that you're reading or a podcast that you listen to. So I think it's really critical to be aware of what's going on, not just in your competitive space, but in the broader kind of technology landscape, and in the broader societal landscape as well. You know, people who are well informed tend to be people who can kind of make good decisions. And I think now you have such a body of work out there, whether it be on Medium or whether it be in podcasts or YouTube, where you can learn from the mistakes that other founders have made in the past and make sure that you don't make them in the future. You've got to talk to people. One of the advantages of the current situation that we find ourselves in is it's very easy to get a 10 or 15-minute Zoom call with someone because people don't have commutes anymore. They're walking from their bedroom into their kitchen, in my case, to work for the day. But the big mistake I see founders making is thinking that the idea that they have is so good that if they went and told anyone about it, that person would immediately steal their idea and go and run and do it themselves. And the reality is that there are always lots of other people working on similar ideas. There were tons of social networks around when Facebook came into being. There were lots of other music streaming platforms around when Spotify came out. Ultimately, the companies that win are the companies that execute well. And the companies that execute well are usually the ones that have gotten lots of good advice, that have gotten lots of good feedback, that have gotten lots of good connections. And the only way that you can do that is by talking to people, other entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, advisors, people in your ecosystem who you admire. I think it's really critical to have those conversations because I think that's going to help you iterate on your product. In fact, the first month of every Techstars program that we run is just companies meeting 100 mentors. They might not necessarily be exact fit for what that company is doing, but getting feedback from 100 really smart people in the course of 3 weeks is incredibly valuable in terms of helping companies refine their proposition, rethink some of their strategies and tactics, and really kind of hone in on the things that matter. So talking is important. I would also say if you're going to talk to people, you need to make sure you listen to them, right? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that proportion. So make sure that when you're having these conversations, you're listening to feedback and that you're not just defaulting into pitch mode. What I hate happening at conferences is people just going, hey, I'm building a startup, it's doing this, what do you think? Right? You're only giving me an option to say yes or no, I like it or I don't like it. You should be asking questions and learning how to ask open questions as well. So rather than saying, I've built an app that allows you to order food directly to your home, you should be asking questions saying, when you currently think about ordering something into your house, what are the steps that you go through? So try to get people to talk to you in full sentences rather than kind of what we think of as closed questions, which is, do you like my idea? Can we do this? Are we going to do that? Because the answer to those questions is either going to be yes or no, right? It's a binary outcome. Whereas what you want is data, a lot of data and a lot of feedback. So, please describe the process that you currently go through to solve this problem. Show me how you fixed this the last time that it occurred, right? You're going to get lots and lots of insights from those open and active questions and none from the ones that are closed. So make sure that you're listening. Some basic things to think about. One of the challenges in the internet today is that people are very good at building products that are functional, right? And they have to be. Your product has to function in order for someone to use it. It has to be reliable. So if I use it once, you need to make sure that the next time I use it, it stays, it works again, and it needs to be usable. You don't want me to be confused when I'm using the product, or you don't want me to not understand what are the steps that you want me to take. So, and we'll touch on kind of how to think about all of these things over the next couple of slides. But also, I think products need to be pleasurable, right? They need to delight people. They need to put a smile on people's faces, or they need to make people feel an emotional connection with the product. And this is really critical because when someone smiles or when someone has a pleasurable experience, it unlocks this reward pathway in your brain, right? It releases these endocannabinoids, right? These chemicals into your brain. And a lot of these chemicals are incredibly important when it comes to forming memories. And it's incredibly important to form memories because there's a lot of competition out there, right? You want people to associate your product or your brand with a pleasurable experience because it's going to be easier for them to remember that the next time that you want them to open it or the next time that they're thinking about a particular problem that they have. And creating these positive associations and creating these memories is important because we have declining attention spans, right? If anyone who has a phone or who has one of these Apple Watches or any other device, you could have dozens, maybe even hundreds of notifications every day, and it's very easy to get your attention pulled away from the thing that you're doing now to the notification. Even that little Slack background noise, pulls people's attention away. So staying top of mind and retaining kind of that engagement and making sure people remember you is critical, because there's only a limited number of hours in the day and minutes in the day, and people already have competition from TikTok and YouTube and their watch or Fitbit or Runkeeper or any number of other products that are out there. So you need to make sure that you're doing something that's going to capture someone's attention, that's going to make you memorable, right? And the best way to do that is to think about, how do you scratch an itch, right? What is the two companies that I started successfully were companies that scratched an itch that I felt myself. So the first company was building mobile content. I felt like a lot of big media companies, which was what I had worked in before I started my first company, were ignoring the rise of mobile back in kind of 2005, 2006. And I traveled to Korea, saw the way that people were using their phones over there, and thought, mobile is the future, and we need we need to produce more content that's specifically for these smaller screens. We need to think about what that content looks like. And as I went and spoke to my bosses, they said, no, that's not what we need. We need to be thinking about kind of big budget productions, etc. And so I was personally feeling the pain point of not having enough content on my phone to consume. And so I started a company. Again, as an investor, when I'm pitched a business, I love meeting founders that say, hey, this is a pain point I felt for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And so I found a friend of mine to start this business with, and now we're going out to the market. Because what that gives you is an unfair advantage, right? So for me, when I was starting my first company, when we were going out and pitching, to work with people, and when we were building our products, I knew a lot of the people in the media world. I knew a lot of the personalities. I knew a lot of content creators. I knew, a lot of the brands and agencies and different people that we wanted to work with. And so, rather than having to start from kind of a point of no knowledge, we were starting with a massive unfair advantage because I had a Rolodex of people that I could contact. So think about what it is that gives you an edge, right? And what it is that's going to give you a deeper understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. The company that I failed at was a company where I was trying to solve a problem in the education space, particularly around US education and the SAT tests. I'd never taken an SAT test. I'm not American. I'm from Ireland. I didn't feel that pain point. I just thought education is a big market and there's an opportunity here. And so I had no unfair advantage. I had no itch that I was personally scratching. And as a result, that business failed. So this is really critical to kind of think about what it is that gives you the unfair advantage. And as you think about that, make sure you surround yourself with great people, right? Get mentors, advisors. Again, as I say, talk to people, listen to the feedback that they're giving you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I made so many mistakes as a first-time founder, and I watch all of the founders that we've invested in at Techstars make mistakes all the time. But the best ones are the ones that learn from those mistakes and that try to reduce the number of mistakes they make by having great people around them. When you're thinking about building a company, you also need to do research. So you need to see who else is in your space. So places like AngelList, Crunchbase, F6S, LinkedIn, etc., allow you to see what other companies are doing things that are similar to you. Being understanding, and again, this comes back to what I said earlier about reading. Being on Product Hunt, being on Hacker News, being on the Reddit technology and entrepreneurship channel, you're going to learn so much about not only entrepreneurship as a whole, but also potentially your product and competitive landscape. So these are all details that you should be constantly kind of reading up on and learning about, because again, the best founders I've backed have been the ones that have been really obsessive about the problem that they're trying to solve and really obsessive about their competition and understanding why they are better than them. Because what no one wants to build is a chocolate teapot, right? If you think about pouring boiling water into this, it's not going to do the job of holding the tea in there, right? You need to build something that again is functional, reliable, usable, and delightful. And in order to do that, you have to follow a very, very simple process, regardless of whether you're building a direct-to-consumer, juice brand, or whether you're building a mobile app, or whether you're building an IoT device. You need to constantly be wireframing, prototyping, testing, and repeating, right? You need to constantly be talking to your customers. Again, talking to people is a function of talking to mentors and investors. It's also doing customer discovery and understanding what it is that people really want from a product, iterating on that, testing different versions of it, understanding, do they like this new version? Is the onboarding flow easier for them to understand, etc. This is really critical. And the biggest companies in the world are doing this all the time. You constantly get Facebook surveys and Twitter surveys asking you for feedback on things. They constantly test new versions of their product in markets like New Zealand and Ireland, where if it doesn't work, there's limited contagion. It won't affect their bigger and more valuable advertising markets. So you should constantly be talking to your customers. You should constantly be thinking about how to iterate your product. You should constantly be testing new things and going back to the start. And only by doing that will you build a product that is scalable and replicable, and one that will kind of iterate and advance and be successful. Because if you just build version 1 of your product and never change it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. All of these digital products need to constantly evolve. And if you're at a very early stage and thinking about this, it's very easy to use any of these tools: Marvel, Fluid UI, Keynotopia. With Keep, the very first version of the product that raised capital was a clickable PDF that was developed using Keynotopia. So all of these tools allow you to build a mock-up of a website or of a mobile app or of a process or anything else. Being able to kind of fake it till you make it and give people the impression that your product is maybe more tangible than it really is critical. So seeing is believing, not just for investors but also for potential co-founders or potential partners. So being able to kind of create mock-ups, being able to and even if you're building a hardware product, being able to kind of get some initial design so that people can get a feel for what it is that you're doing and how it's going to look is really critical. And also, don't be embarrassed. If I look back on the first couple of products that we released, they looked awful. And if you're not embarrassed by the first version that you launched, then you've waited too long to launch. Again, I have portfolio companies that have waited years to launch their product because they want to just get it absolutely perfect. And the reality is, by waiting to get it absolutely perfect, they're not going through that process of talking to their customers, wireframing, prototyping, testing, releasing, getting feedback again from talking to their customers, and going through that process over and over and over again. And there's some great places that you can learn from the mistakes that others have made. So User Onboarding is an amazing website where they do teardowns of the onboarding process of great companies like, Kickstarter, Duolingo, many, many others, where you can start to get a picture for, what worked for them, what are some of the mistakes that they made when they were going through onboarding processes. And so you can start to shortcut that process for your product, or you can start to learn what works and what doesn't work. Because it's one thing getting someone to go to your website or download your app or buy your physical IoT device. It's a whole other thing to get them to actually use it and to get them to actually use it in the way that you want. And again, this is why it's critical to get feedback from real people. So, platforms like UserBob and user testing and others allow you to get real feedback from real people, or even just running focus groups with, ideally with some strangers. Most companies test their product out with their friends. And of course, your friends are always going to say, that's great, it's amazing, we love it. You need to test it out with real people and get real feedback, because they're going to be more critical, and they're going to tell you the honest truth, rather than your friends who are going to have to see you for a dinner or events in the future. Make sure you make your product fast. Instagram starts uploading photographs much earlier in the process. So as you're adding, tagging information and selecting, filters, etc., they're uploading so that when you click on share, it feels magical. When in 2013, when Instagram came out first, it felt like actually there was something really weird happening, because every other photo sharing app started uploading after you'd entered in all the details. So it felt slower, whereas Instagram felt magically fast. And this really matters, because people have, again, back to that attention span, people are very impatient. So a 1 second delay in your load time can lead to a massive decrease in customer satisfaction and a huge decrease in conversions. And all of these things are critical. So really think about optimizing for the speed of your products. Optimize for removing friction in products. How do you make, as you're thinking about building something, think about how it makes people's lives easier, right? If you're building a B2B product, are you going to help your customers save time? Are you going to help them make money? Are you going to help the person who's buying the product look better and maybe get a promotion, right? What are the things that you're taking out of their workday to allow them to be more effective or more efficient? Or what are the things that you're adding into their lives to help them get through processes a little bit easier? This is a great example of it. So Snapchat, the thing that Snapchat wants you to do is share photographs, right? It's a camera company, as they call themselves, but it's a visual communication platform. So when you open Snapchat, the first thing that you see is the camera screen. They don't want you looking at a feed. They don't want you, clicking through endless, stories, etc. They want you to get straight into the camera, take photos, make videos, and share them, right? Whereas obviously what Instagram wants you to do is go through that feed, like, comment, watch ads, etc., etc. So if your product is designed to help someone do something, don't make them click 10 times to get there, because you're going to lose them. They're going to get annoyed, they're going to get pissed off, and they're going to churn. So like, make it really easy for people to do the thing that you want to do. Make it really easy for people to understand what you're saying. The temptation for a lot of founders is to go and be very buzzword heavy. Everyone is building AI on the blockchain, right? I mean, you need to make your story very simple for people to understand, because you are likely to be the smartest person in the room when it comes to your product and your sector, whether you're talking to partners, investors, potential employees, etc. And so if you make them feel stupid by being very complicated, it's not going to go well for you. Think about how you make your product really easy to use. This is Pocket. I've invested in a company recently called Bloom, which is a learning company. And again, it's just a browser extension. It allows me to share the pages that I'm looking at the time, the articles, the PDFs, etc. And then I can go in and annotate them and kind of share them with other people. So make things very, very simple for people to understand and for people to use. Again, remove that friction, because these are your users, right? And I'm always amazed when someone releases a product for the first time, at how many different ways the general public will get it wrong and won't know how to test it or won't know how to use it, right? So you've got to kind of, and again, this is where your conversations and testing and focus groups and so forth, becomes really helpful, because you can avoid people not using your product in the right way if you do that systematically. Just very simple things. Slack do a great job of making it really easy for people to, log in using their kind of, magic link. They tell people, there's not very many programs or platforms that try not to be annoying. So they're kind of telling you to switch off notifications. Again, MailChimp, when you send an email, first of all, the monkey sweats before you send it. And then after you send it, you can high five the monkey a couple of times and the hand gets redder and redder and redder. Like, just very, very simple things that companies do. Inbox by Gmail, you get the smiley face when you've gotten to inbox 0 that says enjoy your day. Superhuman is the same. Spotify had great lightsaber progress bars when the Star Wars movies came out. GitHub do this as well on their 404 pages. So like, cultural references, all of these things are just putting a smile on someone's face, making someone laugh, giving them that little moment of delight in your product, and creating that memory that will get them to come back again. Doesn't have to happen in your product. I have invested in a lot of direct-to-consumer brands that do amazing things to engage their customers on social media and various different platforms, which leads to huge growth in terms of word of mouth and engagement and conversation. Pesky Fish is a company that allows fishermen to sell directly to end consumers. And when you get your box of fish, you get a note from the fisherman who caught it. Again, just being human, and the number of people that post this on Instagram, on Twitter, that engage with it, it's huge free advertising for the company. Give people a reason to come back, right? Like, as they see, people stick these pictures up on their fridge, and again, it's a little memory of Pesky Fish, so that the next time they're thinking about ordering something, they go, oh, I must remember to use them again. Push notifications are a great way to do this. Don't overdo it, but it's a great way to do it. Don't be afraid to be very personal. And if you mess up, this is a company called Sorry as a Service that sends personalized apologies on behalf of companies when they mess up, which happens a lot. So they send cookies or handwritten notes or various different things. And all of this matters because once you have a product in the market, your retention really matters. If you can have a small increase in retention, it can mean a huge increase in profitability and a massive increase in your likelihood of selling something to someone who's a retained user versus someone who's coming in cold. And don't be afraid to change. If you're building a product that doesn't work, pivot. This is an app called Bourbon, which was a social location sharing app that came out in 2012, very similar to Foursquare and Gowalla. So there were a couple of companies like that at the time. It wasn't working. People weren't sharing their locations as much. They were using other applications. And so the founders decided to try something different. And they created an app that allowed you to add filters to the photographs that you'd taken. That app subsequently was acquired by Facebook for $1 billion just 13 months later. So Instagram is probably one of the most successful pivots of all time, next to Netflix, who pivoted out of the what was at the time quite a good direct rental. They would post DVDs to your home. They pivoted into a digital business and obviously have become one of the world's biggest in the world, world's biggest. So don't be afraid to change. I have a portfolio company called Paranoid Fan who were doing live social mapping for sports events. At the start of coronavirus, it became clear that that wasn't going to be a viable business, and they pivoted into Neptune using the same technology to deliver food to people who needed it across New York and many other cities. Again, I had a company called Vitru Health that was doing computer vision for musculoskeletal health and working with physios and surgeons. Again, with coronavirus, a lot of those places shut down. And so they use the same computer vision technology to now start doing squat challenges, exercise challenges, and also desk assessments so that they can monitor how your musculoskeletal health is based on where you're sitting, because most people are not sitting, as you can see, I'm sitting at my kitchen table and not at a proper desk or chair. And I'm going to finish and hopefully have time for a couple of questions, but all of this matters because you have to stand out, right? There are thousands of companies being created every single day or every single week. You know, we see tens of thousands of pitches every year at Techstars, and we're far from alone in that. And so building something that is, you know, functional and reliable and usable is great. Building something that people really love is usually the difference between us making an investment decision or not. So when I see companies come in and they have really positive, even if it's only 100 users, but they have really positive feedback from those users and great reviews and, you know, real engagement with their product, that makes companies stand out. That makes founders stand out. And that is so important, because whether you're pitching to a B2B partner or whether you're pitching to an investor or whether you're trying to, you know, poach someone to come and work at your team, people are going to want to work with companies that are successful. People are going to want to work with companies that have, you know, very positive metrics and that have real engagement from their users. People are going to want to work with companies that build products that people love. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back into Hublot and answer a couple of questions there. But thank you again for your time. Let's click stop share here and then go in. So if anyone has a question, happy to answer them now. I see there's here we go. So there's a couple in the chat. So Mohammed has asked, do I go for simplicity or multifunctioning? For me, I think simplicity is the key to start with. You know, one of the mistakes I see a lot of companies make is they've tried to do too many things early on with too few resources. So I think if you can focus on doing one thing really brilliantly and then start to think about, you know, as you do that brilliantly, as you start to acquire users or customers, how do you kind of add features or how do you add new elements into that product to make it more sticky or to, you know, increase the size of the pie that you're going into. You know, we think about a lot of companies as kind of building a wedge into a market. And so if you can build a very successful, very small initial wedge and then start to add little bits onto it, eventually you kind of start to grow the overall pie for yourself. So I think simplicity to start with, and then as you raise more capital, as you go out and start acquiring more customers, then you can get into and you know, having more staff, then I think you can get into something that's a little bit more multifunctional. What's the best product growth strategy I've seen during COVID? I think I mean, I think a lot of companies have taken advantage of very cheap advertising rates, frankly, to grow over COVID. So a lot of my companies that are in the direct-to-consumer space have been able to significantly, in some cases, you know, 8 or 10x their revenue and their subscriber numbers by taking advantage of some of those cheap cost per click rates. I think a lot of companies have been very smart in terms of B2B companies in particular, building relationships during this time. So recognizing that maybe banks or others won't be able to purchase right now, but there is an opportunity to build relationships over Zoom, to do those kind of short 10, 15-minute calls, get some feedback on the product and build better relationships for the future. I think also kind of you know, a lot of companies in the kind of education space or in the kind of distributed remote team space have done very well at kind of trying to, a little bit like Slack did, infiltrate one part of a business. So say get into the product team, grow from there, and into other parts of the team. So that kind of strategy has worked really well as well. Best books for product growth. I think the High Growth Handbook I think is one of the best. Even particularly for early stage companies. There's by Elad Gil. There's a book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, which is great for very early stage companies to kind of think about how to systematically kind of grow your business and how to do customer discovery and product iteration. And then Scott Belsky from Adobe wrote a great book called The Messy Middle, which is more about kind of later stage companies, but but again, very good one in terms of growth. Does Techstars offer any programs in Egypt? We do a lot of startup weekends in Egypt. So if you go to startupweekend.org, you'll be able to see details of all of those programs. And obviously, given current situations, a lot of our programs are running remotely at the moment. So there's an opportunity to join lots of different startup weekends around the world. We're also running a lot of our accelerator programs remotely. So we have invested in companies from in fact, from all over the world. So there are opportunities for companies in Egypt to do our programs in Abu Dhabi or London or Turin or New York. So I would say go to techstars.com/apply. You'll see a list of all of the programs that are currently accepting applications, and would love to hopefully see one from you. Noor, what is something that's easily overlooked when in the early stages of applying knowledge you're sharing, and how can we avoid those small unnecessary mistakes? That's a really, really good question. I think it goes back to kind of talking and listening. So one of the big mistakes that companies make is they build a product that they think people want rather than a product that they know people need. And part of that is back to they don't go out and do any customer discovery. So I meet companies all the time that are pitching me on, I have this concept based around, an app that's going to allow people to better understand how to manage their money. I say, great, financial literacy is a big problem. How do you know this is a problem? And they say, well, we read some articles about it. And it's like, okay, well, how do you know people actually want the solution that you're building? It's like, well, we read some more articles. Like, what I want to hear is, I went out and spoke to 100 people in, university groups all over the UK, and because that's our target market, and we discovered that 50% of them have this problem. Right there, you're giving me data that I can believe in. So I think the biggest mistake companies make is they build a product where they assume people will want it, rather than building a product that they've gone out and systematically researched and spoken to potential customers and spoken to potential users and come back and gone, okay, this is what people want. To the question that was asked earlier, this is the simplest version of it that we can build, because most early stage companies don't have any money, or don't have very much. And then, this, once you've built the product, those people that you went and talked to the first time around, like, those are your beta testers. You can go back to them and say, hey, remember we spoke to you 3 months ago, like, now we've actually built something, would you like to test it out and give us some feedback? So I think customer conversations, and it's not just at the earliest stages. I have companies who are, doing tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue, who every so often we have to kind of have a board meeting going, go back out and talk to your customers again, right? That process has to repeat over and over. What is the name of the note-taking app? There's a couple of them. So I use just the Notes app on Apple a lot of the time. I also use Bloom Learning, which is a new product that's just out and in the market. So I use that quite a lot as well. And but Evernote, Pocket, there's a couple of people, and a new one called Rome Research that's actually quite good as well. Jeffrey, what's the name of the book again? It's the Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. So the Mom Test. There's a full website and a Coursera course that Rob's put up as well. So definitely well worth a look. Babak, can I connect to you on LinkedIn? Absolutely. The good thing about being called Eamonn Carey is that it's good for SEO. So please feel free to get in touch there. I'm very happy to have a conversation. If anyone has, I think I've asked this one. Simplicity and multitasking I've asked. Steps on how to do products that clients love, especially in e-commerce. So I think e-commerce is tricky because you've got to build an audience. But I think certainly for the e-commerce or marketplace businesses that I've invested in, I think it's all about building something that's very simple for people to understand and use. So I would suggest kind of using as many APIs as you can, whether it be Shopify or Stripe or others, to make sure that you are providing a really seamless experience for people who are using your product. Again, make it very easy for people to search, make it very obvious for what you want people to do when they get on the platform. Because I think a lot of e-commerce sites, you kind of have to click through 20 different pages in order to get to what you want. Whereas the best sites like that, it feels like they have an instinct to understand what you need. So I think making sure that you make the user journey as simple as possible. Maybe have a look at user onboarding, the site I referenced earlier, to see how people have made mistakes in the past, and go there. But really make that journey as simple as possible so that I can think about what I want, go to your website, find it quickly, purchase it fast, and then the real delight is what Amazon do is, delivery is quick, customer service is quick, customer support is quick. So I think that speed is very important as well. Someone asked the question around how to build big companies out of the MENA region. So I think there's huge opportunities. There's just close to a double-digit percentage of the world's population speaks Arabic, and still only about 1% of the content on the internet is in Arabic. So I think being smart about targeting local markets, customer acquisition costs in a lot of markets in the Middle East are substantially lower than they are in the US or Europe or other markets. So kind of thinking about user acquisition is key. I think building, the MENA market as a whole is obviously very different. The GC, I mean, even individual countries are very different and very large. So I would kind of think about, how do you build something that's big and successful in your home market to start with, and build a playbook that will then allow you to enter other markets or multiple other markets. I think we see the same thing in London, for example. We'll invest in companies where we want them to grow into other markets, and so they'll do Techstars, we'll invest in them. They will demonstrate that they can grow and scale in this one initial market, and then it's much easier for them to go and say to an investor, hey, I want to raise $2 million or $10 million to kind of take this process that I've implemented in the UK and launch in the United States, or launch in Japan, or launch in other markets. So I think build your credibility in one market, build really good growth, retention, engagement with your product, build out a really strong process that allows you to kind of go, okay, if you're a B2B company, how do you get sales? What are the case studies that you have to show? How do you develop a kind of a sales funnel and a sales process, and kind of arguments to get people from I'm interested to close. And it's much easier then to go to an investor and say, like, I have all of this expertise now in my home market. I now know, and I've done some initial investigation of other markets in the region, and I know that there are opportunities for me to grow in Egypt or in Tunisia or in the UAE or other markets. So I think if you can go with that story to an investor, it's much easier to get capital to then go and grow, rather than trying to start something that targets the whole MENA region to start with. So build your credibility, build a process, build a playbook, and then I think you can go with a much stronger hand in your deck, as it were, to investors. And then how to adopt new product growth or reinvent an existing one. I think it's sometimes tough to go back and reinvent the wheel with existing products. It's obviously much easier to design new strategies or to examine new tactics for new products. I would say if you have an existing product in the market, I would go and look at what's working, what are people engaging with, what are people, what have been some of the tactics or some of the executions that you've done before, either if it's paid social, or if it's PR, or anything else. Like, understand what worked before, and then go out and talk to your customers again, and understand what, if it's an existing product where growth is slowing down, go and talk to your customers about why they're churning or why they're slowing down. What is it that they need to hear or see in order to become sticky? So again, I would say a lot of it is customer discovery and customer development. So I think that is it. One or two more questions here. The fishing company for last mile delivery is a company called Pesky Fish. So peskyfish.co.uk if you want to find out about them. The presentation I will share with the team, so you'll be able to get a PDF copy of it, and you'll be able to watch it from there. Hiba, thank you. Nice use of neuroscience to build and promote a product. We're all machines at the end of the day in some respects. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I really enjoyed speaking to you all this morning. For those of you who are building products or thinking about building them, again, I would just emphasize, talk to as many people as you can, read as many books and articles as you can. There's such a wealth of information out there in podcasts and on Medium and on Coursera and other places. And if I can ever help